Hello, my name is Kristen Harris. I'm going to speak with you for just a minute about a training I prepared for the BBQuIP, or the Brief Behavioral Questionnaire and Intervention Plan. This is an intervention that's intended to help teachers and people who provide any service to students with help them develop a action plan for a student with frequent behavioral problems. Okay. So on this first slide here, and I have a slide that I'm going to go by, a PowerPoint presentation. On this first slide, it says about the BBQuIP. So I pretty much wanted to make some points that I thought were most important before you jumped into the questionnaire. So for starters, ultimately this is intended to develop a working outline for a behavior plan within a short time frame. So again, we just want to reiterate that this is meant to be brief. It's meant to generate discussion and facilitate problem solving. So, as you read through the questions, you'll notice it should get your wheels turning and maybe get you to thinking about all the aspects that are involved in this student's behavioral issues. It's suggested that it be completed on students who have recently emerging behaviors, and it's suggested that you have made some type of action or made at least one intervention to try to correct this behavior. And we'll talk more about that in just a minute. It's strongly urged that parents are included in this, or at least one person knows the student well. So as you look at the question, it asks about specifics on this student and their tendencies, their behaviors, their likes and dislikes. So that's an important factor as well. And I just want to say that this is intended to be more than one person completing it, because like I said before, it's intended to generate discussion, problem solving. So having the student's parent there or multiple members of that student support system would be the best case scenario. Lastly, I have here, don't get caught up in detail. Again, it's brief. It's something that, if you're spending too much time on the question, maybe give yourself 60 seconds a question, and maybe go ahead and put down the first thing that comes to mind versus spending too much time thinking about a question, because you have to trust that you're going to judge the situation well. Okay, going to the next slide. There are 3 parts to this questionnaire. Part 1 is focused on student progress and how the typical response to the past intervention. So like I stated before, it's important that you have already made an attempt to correct the behavior, because that's part of the questionnaire. It asks about interventions and how the student has reacted to interventions in the past and things like that. So this first part is either open-ended questions or multiple choice. I have here an example of the first couple of questions. Most of the questions are very good about I think all of them are good about putting a other option. So if you don't see the response to your question, you can provide a response in the other column. And so like I stated before, I have there that it's necessary that you've already taken a step to correct the action, because it asks for details on that. On the next slide, we go into part 2, and so that's getting an understanding. So this is where I was saying it asks specifics on students' likes and dislikes, students' personality, communication style, learning style, student behavior, specifics on the behavior that were taking place, whether or not they were harming someone, or it just asks for specifics. So this is yet again another point where problem solving and discussion can be had, because sometimes you just haven't fully wrapped your mind around why this was taking place. So this is all part of that process. Lastly, I have there the motivation assessment scale, and that's only if necessary. So I'm going to go to the next slide. The motivation assessment scale, or the MAS, is a rating scale that's meant to assess functions of problem-solving behaviors in individuals with developmental disabilities. So that would be why it's only if it's necessary, because obviously every student does not suffer from developmental disability. So I have a few details on here about that assessment. It's 16 questions. It's pretty much rated on a 0 to 6 scale. I have listed here, 0 never to 6 always, and that part is pretty much self-explanatory, but you will calculate the scores as instructed. And I have on this last slide here a kind of picture of how it's recorded in the questionnaire. But I think that's all the time I have right now. Hopefully I gave you an accurate depiction of how the beginnings of this questionnaire and communicated my points effectively, and I want to thank you again for your time.